and we appreciate on the public works side, that's my wheelhouse. We appreciate Ben Varley being here today from Volusia County. He's a very big help. As far as stormwater issues go here in Deltona, if you remember back in 2022, September 2022, we had a hurricane come through called Ian. Ian dumped quite a bit of rain on us here in Deltona. We had some flooding. We had approximately 200 homes that got flooded here in the city of Deltona. As a result of that, we started a study of the Lake Teresa Basin. And we're anticipating that study is going to produce some projects. We're going to need to, and we're currently already seeking funding for some of the projects, but once these projects get flushed out, obviously we're going to need money to pay for these things. And we want to fortify our stormwater system to make sure that our residents are safe, that we don't have this kind of flooding again. This was really a tragic event as far as Deltona goes. We had several roads closed of our main roads like Catalina Boulevard, Elkham Boulevard, Cortland Boulevard, some of the residential areas, Riverhead, and so we struggled a little bit when we had that storm. It was very unprecedented for us, and I know that other cities sitting up here at this table have the same types of things happen, and they since then have gone through and identified some projects to help alleviate the flooding as it comes along. And if we had, God forbid, we have anything like that in the future. We all know how it works with Mother Nature and how we have storms unpredicted. This year it's predicted, and I know our emergency management team is here, and they may talk a little bit about upcoming future storms for this year. But we're working very diligently to mitigate those issues. One of the things that we had here in Deltona, one of the problems that we had was getting rid of the water. We're in a closed basin, the Lake Teresa Basin is. So we have an outcrawl structure, but we weren't allowed to operate that structure. Had we been able to do that before the storms came, we might have been able to mitigate some of this. It might not have been as bad. But since then, we got a field authorization, our emergency authorization to open those gates and to alleviate the flood water at that time. We're still under emergency authorization, so we had to also get one for pumping. We had to pump water around different areas of the city. We had to rent a bunch of portable pumps. Since then, we've actually purchased a couple more. It's not that we didn't have any, but when you have something that catastrophic happen, you don't have everything there, and that's the issue. I don't remember how many of you were around in 2004 with Hurricane Charlie. I was here. Charlie, Francis, and Jean. And I worked on the utility side at that time. And, we had lift stations all around the city that were going down. We were losing power. You had the sand pines. They were falling over on the power lines, causing big issues. And so luckily we had a few generators, but we didn't have enough to go around. We just did not. So in those cases, sometimes we rely on other agencies to help us out. There's an agency in Florida Warren, that everybody's a part of. There's also the county, Volusia County. We've worked with them in the past to get equipment as we need it. I know through the state level you can apply for, if you need pumps or generators and that kind of thing as the storm is coming in, you can reserve some things. But a lot of times you have to go out on your own, and you have to make sure that you get these things done with what equipment you have or what rental equipment you can get. So it can become very much of a big challenge, to be able to mitigate those things. And then there's St. John's, obviously, and DEP that you have to deal with and make sure that, you're not causing unintended consequences down the line if you're pumping water from one location to another. I know several years ago back, I can't remember if it was Tropical Storm Faye in 2008 or what event it was, but I know DeBerry went through a big issue. And, 2008, that was close.
2004, but 2008, we were on the national news after Tropical Storm Faye. 2004, we also had flooding with the
Right, and they y'all went in and have done a lot of improvements in your stormwater system since then, and that's just what we have to do. We have to work together as communities and with the county and try to get some of these things mitigated so that we can protect our residents. So I will kind of back down now and pass it on to whoever the mayor says.
So I'll go through each city in alphabetic order. So next we'll have DeBerry, then after that will be DeWitt. And if it's easier, you guys can just take the mics out. So it'll be easier, it's not that heavy.
Okay. Carmen, our city manager, is going to do most of this presentation, but as Glenn has mentioned, we had some really bad flooding in 2004 and 2008. So the city of DeBerry has been working on these issues, and the infrastructure needed to address them for that long. And we've been doing it methodically, although there were some long periods where the projects were stalled. In 2019, which is the year that Carmen was hired, and the first year of election of Phyllis Butlin and myself, we prioritized working through the remaining stormwater projects. We had gotten the major ones done since 2008, but the medium and small size projects that had been identified in those exercises still needed to be done. And so Carmen will explain it, and I asked him to bring a very large spreadsheet that we recently had at a council meeting, not for you to worry about each individual thing, but to show you where you end up after the major projects are done. You still may have a list like this, and we are methodically addressing these, and you'll see many of them apply only to a single address or a couple of addresses. That doesn't mean we can just skip over it because it's one or two people. When we got our ARPA funding, we did assign some of our ARPA to doing the engineering on all remaining projects in the list. So that's why you will see, for most of these, you will see cost estimates or work on design has been done. I offer it not to say, look how good we are. In fact, we had almost no flooding during Ian or Nicole. We had one residence take on 2 inches of water. We know why that happened, and we pumped it out immediately. We had one business take on water. We know why that happened. And that's an infrastructure problem that's been engineered and will go forward in the next year or so. But at the time, that was not the time to say, look at us, we didn't have any flooding and you did. There's no upside to that. But here we're talking about planning, and you are our sister cities. So I wanted him to bring that list, like I say, not to say, look at us, but to say, this is where you can end up after addressing even the major concerns. And so I'll turn it over to Carmen from here.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to go over this list, I'm sorry, it's a little sideways up there. I'm not sure how to rotate it to make it upright. But this is just our what we call our emergency management system. Back in 2008, we had hundreds and hundreds of homes flood. And since 2008, the city of DeBerry has spent a little more than $31 million on their stormwater system to prevent that. And as a result, as the mayor said, Hurricane Ian, we had about 22 inches of rain in 24 hours. We had one home flood that because of a storm drain backup. So much debris got into the storm drain and backed up into their house. Without that, we would have had no homes underwater, no homes having to do that. And so this is our emergency management system. It's a little outdated on the bottom right where it says future drainage system connectivity. That's been done. So that is complete. That's Woodbound Lakes. And so our whole emergency management system, as far as that's concerned, is complete. We're able to move water. The northern part of the DeBerry, water comes in from various different, and that's the orange, comes in from the northern part of the DeBerry into the pond across in front of the DeBerry Golf and Country Club. And then we pump water out of there all the way to the Burrow Pit in the southwest corner of the bottom left of your sheet there. And you may hear me joke, if you really want to solve your stormwater issues, buy a burrow pit. And that's, you can buy a burrow pit, you can create a burrow pit, you can do all kinds of things with burrow pit because the St. John's Water Management District sees that as a filtering mechanism. And you'll actually get some nutrient and loading credits for it. And so it's an endless, and there's no limit to what you can pump in there until you can hold. This is a 40-acre burrow pit, and we're able to pump hundreds of millions of gallons of water into that burrow pit. And it is one of the best draining areas in the city. So when you plan this out, if you're going to go that particular route, you can buy some property, you can dig it out, you can sell the root fill, create that burrow pit, and then run your pipes to that particular location. And certainly, it makes a great reservoir for you to be able to move water safely around your city. The central, the green, the yellow areas there is our central system. That goes all the way down through, and then down through Dirksen Avenue into the DeBerry Bayou. The county has a baffle box right there on Dirksen Avenue to make sure that the water is clean and filtered before it enters into the DeBerry Bayou. And then the green area goes all the way to Lake Monroe. And so that's our emergency management system. The more sophisticated you are in grafting these out, the more educated your residents will be on how that system works. Our stormwater fees that we charge, a good portion of that goes to the management of our emergency management system. The 23 projects that we have on here, we call them nuisance problems. None of these flood any homes or a threat of flooding any homes. Right now, we're doing a James Pond pump station for this fiscal year. We're running an advertisement here in the next couple of weeks. That typically we rent pumps to pump the water out of James Pond to the St. Johns River, and it costs us about $100,000 a year when hurricanes come. So return on investment for $600,000, we can put a lift station in that operates efficiently with a generator. No human resources is necessary, and return on investment, we'll get a return on investment in about 5 years. And so that's the way we look at those things. And so we no longer will have to rent a temporary pumps at $100,000 a year to handle all the hurricane stuff. And then all these other ones here are basically nuisance type things where people's backyards are flooding, their front yards are flooding. They're very small. As the mayor said, we took our ARPA money and decided that just to go ahead and engineer them all, and we can take them off, get them all permitted, and we can pick them off one at a time as we can afford to do them. And so, yeah, once we get through this list, I'm fair to say that we'll be pretty much done. We'll be 100% complete. And so that's a good feeling to be in. But we have the city of DeBerry made this a priority number one for the last 15 years. When we came on 5 years ago, we had a 15-year backlog on stormwater projects that had been done 15 years ago. We purposely raised our millage rate, got some major projects done that were really kind of the blockade for all the other projects getting done. And then we reduced it right back down, our millage rate back down after we got those projects funded. We told our residents that this funding was specifically for infrastructure. It went to infrastructure, and we did what we said. We went up 1 year to 3.5 mils and dropped back down to 2.92 mils the following year. So that's how you gain the trust and respect of your residents. You do what you say, and that's exactly what we've done. So this is our problem. We're glad to take any questions that you might have. But please use this as your benchmark. We'll be glad to share everything that we have and our stories that we went through this entire project. So.
Carmen, I've got a question. Sure. The DeBerry Bayou, wasn't that slated somewhere to be renovated or completely? Aren't there like some barriers in places?
No, the St. John's Water Management District, I think in cooperation with Volusia County, we're working on doing some weed treatment in there and everything else. And so they took they spent $300,000, I think. And Ben maybe can correct me. I don't know if this was your project or not.
State.
It was the state, yeah. And they took a lot of the weeds and vegetation out of the DeBerry Bayou. That was supposed to be phase one. I don't know when they're going to do phase two, but they were going ahead and remove the vegetation and re-deepen the very value.
But that's what I was referring to. Thank you.
Is there any other questions for the city of DeBerry? Public? Commissioner McCool?
What was that, the financial equivalent of you, how much did you raise that year by, I think, the village rate? What was the actual, do you remember what the dollar was?
We had a project that was blocking everything else because at the time, don't quote me on this, but it was like $1 million, $1.2 million, and that's what it took us to get that money. So the increase created the million or ballpark, it's a little over $1 million, that was needed for what we call the Woodbound Lakes project. And at that time, those residents were out of patience. It had been 15 years, and whatever you want to credit it to, the water levels were higher than they'd ever been. And so small storms were raising the level of Woodbound Lake to a threatening level in their eyes and in reality. And so there was no more, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. The residents were done with this. And that was the environment in which I was elected, Phyllis was elected, and then shortly thereafter we hired Carmen. And that was the reason that I put forward as my highest priority, accelerating the stormwater projects, because while Woodbound was the big one and we had to figure out how to do it to get it out of the way so we could begin the others, there were several others right behind them that were long-standing, and residents were, and I get it, really upset that they've been told, we'll get to you, we'll get to you, we'll get to you, and then they see things changing, water levels changing, they don't know what the reason is. Can't be sure that I know what the reason was, but they became more threatening more frequently, and they were worried about their homes. I get it. So we said we have to do what we have to do. But it was on the order of $1 million something, and our stormwater fee didn't create that $1 million to get it done. And so that's what we did for that 1 year.
And Commissioner McCool, when we first got there, the mayor and I in 2019, our stormwater workshops were extremely chaotic. A lot of complaints, a lot of issues, a lot of projects were kicked down the road. And Councilmember Sell will be able to tell you that our last workshop that we did on stormwater, we had one person attend, and it was a compliment. And so that's how we have turned the community, and through education and everything else, and through our performance, turned a chaotic stormwater situation into one that's very complimentary and a benchmark for this particular area.
And I don't want you to think it was easy, because it wasn't. That Woodbound Lakes project was problematic. We re-engineered it internally a couple of times. I remember sitting around the table just brainstorming with the engineer and Carmen and saying, isn't there a way we could do this differently that would serve a couple of needs? And then there was this barrier and that barrier and the other barrier and a gas line to be moved, and it was tough. And it didn't happen with that 1 year that we collected the money for it. We began it, we were in the middle of it, but it took us several years to actually finish the project. But in the interim, we knew exactly what we were doing. We managed it through any storms that came, and we ended up with it done.
And the reason I was asking is trying to understand, you chose to raise the millage rate versus doing a storm assessment fee, right?
We already had a storm assessment fee. Our stormwater fee covers half of our public works is stormwater and half of it is straight public works. So the salaries for stormwater come out of that stormwater fee. And back when we were doing the major developments, investments, we had taken out 2 bonds. Those prior councils had taken out 2 bonds to fund some of this. We didn't have 31 million sitting around that Carmen mentioned that we just wrote checks against. So over time, there were 2 stormwater bonds, and the debt service on those is covered by our stormwater fee. The operational expenses of the salaries that are assigned to stormwater comes out of that fee. It was already higher than any of yours. And no, we did not try to create another $1 million by hiking that fee up, which goes to all the same residents that we're going to get the higher millage. It was a one-off, and we chose to do it via millage rather than to mess with that. And what we have done with the stormwater fee was we have streamlined how it's administered, pulled out all administration fees out of it. And I think I had a conversation with you about that at some point. And then we have reduced it. We're paying down the debt. At the end of 26, when I will be termed out as mayor and say my goodbyes, I think all of our debt, including those stormwater bonds, will have been paid down to where we only owe, as a city, about $1 million in total for all bonds.
And just a financial strategy with that is that we refinanced those before, obviously, the interest rates went up. Our interest rate on both of our bonds, one is 2.6% and the other one's 1.4%. So we did some good financial strategies refinancing our debt.
That 1.4, I feel so good about that one. It was in the north ones, but it had a June 2023 balloon. And when I saw that, I'm like, several years, early on in my tenure, I said, no way are we getting anywhere close to that balloon. We have all these years to address it. We're going to refinance that long before we have a balloon facing us. And there's no reason we can't. We can be prudent about this. So we refinanced it and we got 1.4. I used to say we want to prioritize paying off all this debt, not at 1.4 or 2 point whatever. We're using OPM and we're making money every day.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move to the lands and then Lake Keller.
Yeah, no, I will try to keep it brief. The land has a little bit of luxury of not having too much flooding. There's some flooding in some outskirts of Volusia County areas of the land, but just to kind of give an update of what some of the things the land has been doing recently. One, we have a 2019 master plan for our stormwater that we're going through the process of updating right now, as well as our rate study, which ends in 2025. The other thing I know Delaney gets hit a lot on is our development that we have. Everyone that drives through the land, there's a new development every other feet. Some of those are past developments, but when you look at a lot of the new developments that we're putting through, the requirements in stormwater have been elevated to a point where the developers are hopefully taking care of some of those extra duties. If you look at the Taylor Ridge project, which is one of our areas of the land that kind of shares some flooding issues, the stormwater retention that is put on that property is well above anything that has been passed in surrounding areas. So I would 100-year storm flood being retained on over a 24-hour period. So we're trying to, when we look at those new developments, mitigate some of that stormwater through adding technology, whether it's berms or some new stormwater kind of treatment on property, but then also working those PD requirements that we've been put into place, working those into our LDR requirements so that they're actually written in stone where there are additional stormwater requirements placed on our development. So that's one thing. We were lucky enough to bring in the Lake Moore property, which is also kind of surrounded by it's 128 acres that will stay preserved. It will be a passive park, so there will be no improvements on it, so that will definitely help in that stormwater area. And just even looking at projects that come around, we have the old fire station right by City Hall that is being replaced by parking, a much needed item. But our downtown area also has some stormwater flow issues. So in the process of redoing that parking lot, we are adding to our capacity to move water from one place to another so that those areas in downtown hopefully see a little relief in that aspect when we do have a high volume event. But other than that, it's something that we're continuing to work on. It's kind of a work in progress type thing, and every municipality is has that idea that it's never fixed. There's always going to be something else to do. So that's why we're staying up on our master plan and rate study is important. With that, I'll pass it along with no questions.
Is there any questions for the next? Well, no questions? We're gonna go, did somebody?
There was a question.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the panel, do any of you municipalities utilize a pump out system, or is it all gas?
Yeah.
So can we get somebody to give the gentleman the mic that's over in the corner? please?
I can use my outside voice. Now, I was just wondering if any of you use.
And Mr. Block, just for the rest that don't know who you are, if you can just state your name, please.
Oh,
And what city you're.
got yourself in the mess now. I'm just, hi, I'm Tim Watt, I'm from Deltona. I'm a local troublemaker. Anyway, but this is one of my favorite subjects. I was just wondering if all the other municipalities involved us on Deltona, but I'm wondering if the other municipalities are using some sort of pump out system where you have a central location, it acts as a reservoir, and if it gets too high, you just activate the pump and it all goes away. As opposed to, it all sounds like you're talking about passive systems, gravity passive systems.
Well, Barry has about 20 lakes. No, I'm sorry. DeBerry has about 20 lakes. And so we pump from lake to lake to move the water. And so some of our lakes, like No Name Lake, the lift station that we're putting in the James Pond, Woodbound Lakes, that gets permitted, and we actually manage the level of the lake so that it doesn't create any flooding. And so when it gets above that particular level, the lift station kicks on, or the pump station kicks on, and then moves the water to the designation. We have that. Now, we do have some areas in DeBerry that we do have trenches, like down High Banks Road. We do see that on our list here. Those trenches are about 3 or 4 feet deep that go out to the St. Johns River and have been for decades. And on our list is to be able to replace that trench. Is trench work? Absolutely. But our long-term goal is to go ahead and pipe that and take it down to the river and then seal it up and eliminate those very large ditches on the sides of roads.
And the other city.
Was this part of your plan that, incorporated fixing the whole problem together, or was it always there?
Well, this was our strategy. Well, how do you move water in specific areas? And how do you get it to safely protect your residents? Of course, the Burr Pit that we bought in 2004, we bought that Burr Pit specifically to run water to from our north side down to that particular Burr Pit. Now, we did get a FEMA grant towards that one. That's about $4 million back then. It'd probably be 15 to 20 million today. But that system was designed to move. That's where our biggest problem was. And that system was designed to move all that water on the north side down to that Burr Pit. But every single flooding particular area with our lakes, we try to put in pump stations to manage the level of the lake, so it eliminates that particular flooding for that particular area. And then any water we move to that lake gets managed and then getting pumped out to either the St. John's Monroe, the Missouri Bayou, or the Burr Pit.
Now, here's the big question. Do you pump all your water into the St. John's on the north side or the south side of I-4?
All right, and that's gonna have to be the last question because we have others.
Yep, we pump the water on the green area that you see. You have a map there. The green area runs down to I-4. It runs under Dirksen Avenue into Lake Monroe. And so it does go into Lake Monroe on the very east side of Lake Monroe.
Nice work.
Thank you. And I believe Warren City also wanted to.
And by the way, that's all permitted by the St. John's Water Management District. So that's it's all covered.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, I'll defer until it's our city's turn to address stormwater.
Okay.
That way I can explain how it all works together.
Okay, great. All right, we'll go ahead and go to Lake Helen, and then we'll do Orange City and then Volusia.
I have police history with Ian. I've been at Lake Helen just about 3 months. I'm aware of some isolated flooding that they had and pumping that was done. I think the commission, I've got Heather Rutledge here, so I'll let Heather pipe in if there's some more specifics that I don't have. That the commission did approve a stormwater increase, which is to fund stormwater master plan. Small staff, you can see the list that was facing me coming in 3 months. That's on that list, but I can't tell you it's tomorrow. The concern I hear from my public works director and the commission and others is that the Lake Helen and the other lakes in Lake Helen are at an all-time high now. And this is April and May, and we haven't even hit the rainy season or the storm season. So, I mean, there's that anticipation of the concern, and it's all a closed basin, so that there's nowhere for it to flow other than, you know, so if you want to pump from one to another, you could just be exacerbating the problem. It's in terms of their, I am a Floridian from Orange County, and gone through all the hurricanes that you've mentioned, but during it, I was working up in northern New Hampshire in the mountains, so for the last 3 years, I got my experience on snowstorms and blizzards, not hurricanes. But we will be having workshops and with the commission as that master plan is developed. But like DeBerry, you know, made those positive decisions and were able to help educate their residents on the need for the higher millage and what you got out of it. And I think that's going to be the challenge on our end, is making sure that people understand what you're being asked to spend for and see tangible results that are out of it. And that will be something hopefully I'll be working with on the commission. Heather, do you want to add anything into some specific areas? So we're in terms of like, why don't you come up?
Heather, if you want to sit right here.
Yeah, Vern, get the.
My notes. I'm taking notes. I just wanted to add that we are seeing record high in our lakes, and so we have Lake Harlan, which was dry before, and now it is completely taken over most of the land that it's on. So this is really unusual for us. We're still seeing it now, and we have recently done a stormwater study, and we have prioritized a list of projects that need to happen. But my concern, and one of the reasons that I was very eager to come today and to listen, was because we are still seeing the water so high and it is a closed basin. So we're looking to see if there's some way that we can alleviate what we're experiencing now before what's projected. And I think we are seeing 21 projected storms, named storms this season. So it's quite concerning because we do have some residents that are still facing some of the effects of the last event. So.
Is there any questions for Lee Kelly? Well, at Orange City.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm basically going to defer to Dale here because she knows everything. And but Carmen, we did take your advice and bought a borrow pit. I remember a couple of years ago, you were speaking somewhere and you said, if your city can buy a borrow pit, you better go do it. And as a lot of you remember, several years ago, we tried to get the county, Deltona, all the cities around us, DeLand, St. John's, DEP, and everyone together to buy the borrow pit, but I guess it didn't work quite as good as they wanted for that load on it, so it's more than what we need. So Deltona, if you need to buy some space in there, we'll do it to you. But I'm going to turn it over to Dale, and she can tell you about all the projects and everything.
Sure. So Orange City adopted its first comprehensive stormwater plan in 2016. And it took what are our 3 big basins and broke it into more than 20 micro projects. We were not able to implement about 20% of that is because we found ourselves needing to buy land. People were not willing sellers, and we were looking at condemnation proceedings almost any time we said the word water. So we looked at different ways that we could adjust. Our biggest problem was that our primary pumping system popped off to the St. Johns River watershed and to the drainage system that went into the river. And when we needed to pump the most is when we would no longer be able to, and that the river was starting to rise and we would adversely impact downstream properties. So as the mayor mentioned, he listened to Carmen tell too many jokes. And we found ourselves in the midst of Ian. I wound up dictating a rental agreement to lease a borrow pit. And the county allowed us to use their piping structure that went to outfall. And we did not have but one house that experienced minor flooding due to a homeowners association law. But it enabled us to keep Mill Lake Pond, which is our Lake, which is our primary retention area for the US 1792 basin, well below flood level and did not impact any of the surrounding streams. Right now, we are redesigning our master plan to address the problems that we experienced relying upon the borrow pit, the Lake Park, and a newly created borrow pit that we're building ourselves behind our Public Works Department. And that will enable us to address our natural drainage systems, which are roughly located east and west of US 1792, and be able to actively pump all the water either to the borrow pit that we are creating or to the borrow pit that we bought. And we really think that will solve most of our problems. We have two ancillary problem areas that I would like to address. One is making sure that HOAs actually maintain their privately taken care of infrastructure. And that is where we had problems last year and actually experienced household flooding due to ill-maintained for the long-haul private drainage systems. We're working with those HOAs. We're coming a long way on that, and we have addressed some of their problems as we did other road work in the area with them participating in the solutions to that. A second problem that we've had is what happens to our street infrastructure. And one of the problems that we're facing is Graves Avenue being lapped at on both sides of the street by a drainage basin. The fix to that is nearly a $4 million construction project that raises the elevation of Graves Avenue and completely replaces its under system and puts in culverts that allow the lake to go from one side of the road to the other. We're having a difficult time granting or getting grant dollars for that. It is a cost more than the city can bear because they indicated that it's an initial design flaw of the roadway system. So, you know, as that road is important to city residents to reach Deltona, it's important for Deltona residents to come to US 1792. So if in your discussions with legislators or others, please let them know that we have submitted grant funding applications for that and look for assistance on that project in particular. Thank you.
Did you also want to expound on this question?
Well, I think the answer is that yes, we actively pump. Our pumping is to, in the past, it was to the St. Johns River, which, as I spoke of, has problems when it reaches flood level. Now it is actively pumped to a borrow pit that we have purchased. And it has worked so well, we're designing a second borrow pit that we can actively pump to as well, that serves a different area of the city.
Dan, I wanted to piggyback on something that you said, and it does go to your comment, but this has to do with where water goes into the St. John's. You said it hurts the residents downstream, and because it's a north-flowing river, it's not exactly downstream. So, Deltona, where its water flows into the St. John's, is before it gets to where the Berries flows into the St. John's, is before it gets to where Orange City would flow into the St. John's. So, DeBerry has a little finger of land off of Dirksen on the other side of I-4. This is roughly about where we pump into our water that flows to the St. John's eventually flows in there. But then it proceeds north past the rest of DeBerry. It doesn't come down to Deltona. For example, if anybody was listening and thought that might complicate Deltona's flowing to the St. John's, that's not the case. It goes upstream, and by the time ours goes in, Deltona's good.
Downstream is downstream.
Oh,
It's a movement.
It's north. North is downstream. Okay, that's,
Yes.
we usually think of downstream as flowing south. At any rate, that, because it's a north-flowing river, our cities add to the stream after Deltona adds, if they are adding.
Yeah, I-4X is a dike for the entire area, so does 46.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and go to Volusia County. Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the county, let me start off with some of the projects we got going on, specifically on the west side. With some of our ARPA funding, one of the major issues that we encounter during extreme rain events is Boozer Pond down in the Breezewood area. We have a project under design, pump station, to pump that water out to a series of ponds to the east that have plenty of volume to take that water. We've had some structure flooding in that area in the past, and it also, there's no natural outfall, so when we get a lot of rain, I believe it takes some of the water off of 1792, the DOT sends their water to us, and it becomes our problem. So we're in design to construct a pump station at that location and hopefully alleviate that problem. One thing I will say about pump stations, obviously a big topic today. Ideally, in stormwater, it flows passively by gravity. The amount of water that flows through a gravity 12-inch, 24-inch pipe is significantly greater typically than a pump can handle. DeBerry does a great job of managing their pump system in advance of the storm, which is the key to have that volume, because if you're trying to pump the water during the event, you're never going to keep up. So that's the key to these types of systems, is to use those pumps to generate a fair amount of volume to absorb that water during the event, and then hopefully afterwards you can run those pumps to equalize everything out. And pumps are expensive, they have to be maintained operationally, generators, those kinds of things. So unfortunately, in the west side of the county, we deal with a lot of closed basins, and pumping is our only option. And so we're probably going to see a lot more of those systems moving forward. And we get a little bit into the funding side of things. So I know when DeBerry, after Tropical Storm Faye, implemented their stormwater utility and plan for that, a lot of the funding they received was through the hazard mitigation grant funding, which is something that collectively we do as a county, and all the cities participate in through the local mitigation strategy, which is actually run out of Clint's shop. But that is a very good tool to get basically 75% funding for a lot of these projects. And the way that works, and I'm sure all y'all are familiar with it, is we generate a list of projects. Ideally, they're as shovel ready as they can be. When we have a named event, there is an inflow of money from the feds that comes in, and we start ticking off projects that are collectively ranked amongst the cities in the county. And DeBerry was very successful in using that money in other municipalities as well. So I would encourage everybody to utilize that as much as possible. And then we've recently held our kickoff meeting for the Transform 386 funding, which includes $50 million for infrastructure and $42 million for resiliency. We've received a list of potential projects from the cities, and we're going to be working with the cities on that process to rank and evaluate those proposals, and hopefully we can distribute money to cities for stormwater-related resilience projects that will provide an additional funding source for those of you who are looking for grant-related. And you can use that, you can even use it as your match for the MVP project. So you get the 75% from the feds, maybe you get the 25% from the Transform 386. And so hopefully that'll spur quite a few projects moving forward. On the county side, County Council has recently approved a rate increase based on this utility rate study that we performed for a stormwater fee. The fee remained unchanged from 2007, I believe, at $72 per year. It was raised $6 last year, and it's going up to $96 this current year. Council directed staff to come back with a plan to do an incremental increase to get it to $144 a year, which is the recommended rate by the utility study. Part of the recommendation in the utility study, the rate study, was we had done a series of stormwater watershed studies throughout the county. We have 16 distinct watershed basins throughout the county. In the early 90s, when the stormwater utility fee was first put in effect, a lot of that money was geared towards doing studies in those watershed basins. Some of the ones that we have are quite old. A lot has changed. Development has changed. And so with this increase in revenue that we're going to see from the rate increase, our plan is to perform or update 2 to 3 basin studies a year. A lot of those watersheds include municipalities. You know, we all know that stormwater doesn't stop at municipal boundaries. It really is a collective effort. So we will be getting with municipalities and working with those folks, with your staff, on coming up with maybe some cooperative projects or cooperation on the studies themselves to make sure that the municipalities that are impacted by those basins have a seat at the table when we're doing that work. And then from those studies, we anticipate seeing a series of projects get recommended, whether they're flood related, water quality related. That's the other side of this. I know we were all talking about flooding because of what happened with the recent hurricanes, but the regulatory requirements associated with water quality, the BMAPs, the TMDLs, all those kinds of things are requirements that have been initiated in the last 10 to 15 years that weren't anticipated when at least the county's stormwater utility was initiated. So what we anticipate is projects that serve the dual purpose, that go towards water quality as well as flood control. And so we will be working on generating those list of projects, identifying areas that have flooded or have flooding issues. You know, what we're seeing now, we track rain data, specifically on the west side. We all talk about closed basins. So we're very impacted by the amount of rain we get. That affects the groundwater level, those kinds of things. So 20 years ago, from like 2000 to maybe 2015-ish, you would see rain data, you would see an above average year, then you would see maybe a below average year, and it would alternate. And that would allow the groundwater to recover, you know, during those below average years when we have the above average rainstorms. Now what we're seeing since roughly 2015 and on is we're seeing above average year, above average year, above average year. And so we're not getting that recovery time. We're seeing, you know, Mayor Shazay, you spoke to it, areas where the lake levels were high, even during normal rain events. And what we're seeing is with this above average rain, these higher intensity rains, the groundwater can't recover. It's more saturated. That means more runoff. That means higher lake levels. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to account for when we do these studies and anticipate these higher intensity rain events in above average rain years. And so one thing that's getting talked about when it comes to updating stormwater requirements is a lot of these storms that we design to, the amount of rain that falls in a 100-year, 24-hour storm event. It's 11 inches of rain. We see 11 inches of rain in 24 hours a lot more often than 100 years. I mean, I've been working in Volusia County in this area for a while, and I've definitely seen more than one of those events. So it's something we got to look at. It's something the county's definitely going to take a look at when we do these studies, and we are going to be reaching out to the municipalities and ensuring that it's a collaborative effort and that everybody's voice is heard, because, like I said, stormwater doesn't stop at the city limits, and it's a collective problem that we all need to address.
Does anybody up here have any questions?
I've got a quick question. 16 basins. When I think of a basin, I think of something that's by a river or a lake or something. So like a swamp area could be a basin?
No, a watershed. So, watersheds can be macro and micro. So I like to start off and say, if you really want to pull back and do the big view, in the continental United States, there's two watersheds, west of the Rockies and east of the Rockies. And then you can kind of zoom in from there. In Volusia County, a watershed, what we've identified, most of ours vary in size, but we have some over 100 square miles and some as small as, 5 or 6 square miles. And it's really a focus on, the topography of the land and where the water flows and where it outfalls. Does it kind of flow into one area? And so we've got some basins like Lake George, the Middle Hall Creek, and Deer Creek up in the northwest part of the county that really we've identified them. We haven't even done a study up there because there's just frankly not a lot. We don't have issues, but we have other areas where we've done master studies of the basin, then we've come in and done sub-basin studies of certain areas, because even within a basin, you might have, especially on the west side, we have a lot of closed basins. It might be a larger basin, and then you come in and you zoom in on an area where you're having a problem and you do a sub-basin study. So part of our plan is, we're going to update some of those larger basin studies, but there's some areas where we now have issues that we might do a smaller sub-basin study to pinpoint what's going on in that particular area. So most cities will do a stormwater master plan that incorporates their city. I heard Dale say, there's 3 kind of distinct watersheds in Orange City. So that's kind of, Orange City is part of the DeLand Ridge. So you can zoom out to the DeLand Ridge, which includes DeLand, Orange City, parts of DeBerry, or you can zoom into Orange City, which has 3. So it's kind of your view of how big the watershed is.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Pullback, Commissioner or Councilman Sutton.
Ben, I wanted to ask you, earlier in the month, I attended a council meeting where you presented a study. It was great reading, all 514 pages of it. And we talked, or council talked at that time about pinpointing some watershed studies, and there were qualifications for a city to participate in. I was asking about Deltona being a part of that study. Is there an update on your primary areas of focus in regards to what that study told you?
So, yes, we will be presenting in the budget, during the budget process, a priority list of what we intend to study as far as our watershed study. The criteria we're looking at is the age of the study that was done, and also taking into account recent events. And obviously we have homes in areas where there weren't homes before. We have a lot of areas where you have older platted neighborhoods where there wasn't stormwater infrastructure installed, but they have vested rights to construct houses. That is a common problem we're seeing, where folks come in and build a house, and because the standards for maybe a septic tank require the septic tank to be elevated so the whole property comes up, but you got a neighbor next to it that's maybe lower, and you know, but they have a vested right to build their house. They have to adhere to current standards, and you got so there's these impacts that you see on that micro scale, and then so we're going to prioritize the basin studies. We're going to present that to council during the budget process, and it'll take into account multiple variables like I've described.
And hence my reason for bringing this up again, because I was, you know, vigorously raising the hand in Deltona, because it showed when our last watershed study was that we qualified every bit of criteria and the most populous too. What I believe is also one of the most progressive changing topographies, right? So that's just my pitch for the city of Deltona. Pick me, pick me.
So I would anticipate, because a large portion of the Deltona Basin is incorporated.
Yep.
So that would be a great opportunity for collaboration with the city on participating with that kind of a study, because you know there's portions of unincorporated Deltona that have issues, and then there's portions of incorporated Deltona that have issues, and some of them cross those boundaries. So we're going to take a look at all those basins. The one in Deltona is pretty old. I was looking at it the other day, the McGarry, the Teresa, and the Gleason basins, and then we actually did a sub-basin study on McGarry because they had experienced flooding during that time, and actually there was a series of projects performed, permitted, that actually created a positive outfall for the McGarry Basin all the way to Lake Monroe. And so that's why those areas with that positive outfall drain fairly well during these types of storm events. But we will have plenty of opportunities to work with the cities on a lot of these basin studies.
Councilman Sell.
Just an observation, Aaron touched on it, but just a reminder that Barry not long ago was extremely dysfunctional. And people have a really short memory sometimes, and they don't remember just how bad it was in Barry. But with a plan, the right city manager, the council get on board, come up with your wish list of projects that you want to get knocked out, come up with priorities, and start that process early on. It sounds like there's quite a few new city managers here. Swallow your pride. If another city has done a phenomenal job getting water from point A to point B, reach out to that person. Pick their brain. It's a no-brainer. It just feels like sometimes cities get into competition and they just want to struggle and do things on their own. And I think sometimes the easy answer is your neighbor. I know, speaking for myself, it feels like West Volusia itself is kind of on its own sometimes. And it helps us as a city and Barry, if our neighbors pick themselves up and do better. Same thing with our city, the land. I mean, I attend events throughout, and I know the last flood we had, I spent 2 weeks of my vacation helping other people in other cities. And I really like that vacation time back. So I would love for Deltona, you know, and its residents. We used to have people come to our meetings crying because they couldn't flush their toilet because their yard was flooded. You got to take care of them, and it's not going to happen overnight. It starts with a really solid plan. It's going to take a lot of money. Go after other people's money. Don't spend your residents' money if you don't have to. That money's out there. It takes a little work to get it, but it can happen. And I really see, Deltona coming out of this. I see them going to start to come out of this, and 5 years from now, you don't have to sit here and remember where you're at and where you're at that day. And I really think that you guys have a golden opportunity. And Mayor, it starts with you. Sit down with your new city manager. Make a plan.
Thank you, Councilman Sell. We're going to go ahead and move over to infrastructure. And we'll, actually, we'll go the other way this time. We'll start with Volusia County. I'm sure Glenn feels something.
So traffic can be an issue, obviously. You know, there's I think this is a little out of my shop, but there's a new law regarding collection of impact fees and proportionate fair share. I believe our growth and resource management team will be reaching out to the cities on for agreements regarding that. A lot of the funding that goes towards infrastructure is dictated by state law and what we can collect. At the county, the primary revenue stream for our operation and maintenance is the gas tax, which we share with the cities. It is maxed out in Volusia County. We do get about $6 million a year of what we call the new nickel, which is dedicated towards capacity, which if you were to construct a new 2-lane thoroughfare road or widen the 2-lane thoroughfare road to 4 lanes, that might get a mile built these days. And inflation costs associated with infrastructure have skyrocketed, as we all know. And so the primary issue we're facing is a revenue situation. Obviously, the county is responsible for the thoroughfare road network, the capacity projects associated with development. Primarily, we are using impact fees and proportionate fair share money to make those improvements. However, the money we collect in the 4 impact fee zones can only be used in those 4 impact fee zones. So there are certain impact fee zones which are seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of revenue, and then there are some that are not. So we're working through those challenges. I know some of y'all are participating in that elected officials subcommittee on transportation. We've kind of talked about this and trying to come up with a strategy for how we can go about getting additional revenue for some of these capacity projects. And then obviously a lot of that is working with the DOT and trying to get their help in working towards some of these high dollar projects that involve bridges over interstates or rivers, and which the county nor the cities combined have the funding for. So at the end of the day, it comes down to revenue. I've been in construction all my life. I always say, if you give me enough money and enough time, I can build anything you want. But unfortunately, that's a limited resource, and so we're dependent on that revenue to increase the capacity of the projects, or increase the capacity of the road network to meet the demand from development that's occurring. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you all may have, or just listen to the discussion and chime in.
I do have one question for you. The corner, quick question I'm going to ask probably. Corner of Graves and Howland. Is there any plans from the county, and what can we do as an individual city specifically to help with the situation in that area?
So that's an interesting area. I actually received an email from Councilmember Robbins. I think it was brought up at the TPO meeting the other day. And I passed it along to our traffic engineering group to take a look. A portion of that area, I believe, is in the restricted access right-of-way of the DOT. So I think anything that we do will have to be in collaboration with them. I understand there's a pedestrian concern with primarily, I think, from the high school students trying to access food places on the other side of Howland. So that's something we can take a look at. It's on our radar, and I should have a response back to everyone here probably next week on that. But any solution is going to involve working with the state and the city on that.
Any other questions? Commissioner McCool.
sorry, this is my jam. And talking about transportation in the cities, I bring this up to CPO, I bring this up to county, and we simply must, as a collaborative body, one of my biggest veins is traffic impact analysis. And the fact that when we're developing, taking a closer microscopic look at how old these TIAs are and how we allow development to proceed without updated TIAs. Because if we go back even 4 years and try to build something for what things cost 4 years ago, it's not going to happen. And anything older than that is ridiculous, because at that juncture, the developer is not paying their proportionate fair share, and you're dipping into the pockets of taxpayers. Look at Howland Boulevard out here that's rated at an E right now. X is what? F, for failing. And we have situations that occurred in our city where we could have benefited from $8 million had a TIA been updated properly to today's terms. So I just try to make the county aware of that also when stuff comes across the desk, because it's costly. It's a costly mistake for us, and we are decapped by what we can recover from developers. And so, in looking at what we require as cities and a county for a developer to bring to the table, especially when we talk about impervious areas, really needs to be addressed. I think it's very important to us as we move forward with any kind of development. We can't change how much Tallahassee lets us receive from impact fees, but we can change as a collective body the requirements for building in our counties and in our cities. And I believe that addressing the impervious surfaces would go a long way towards that with developers.
If I may. So Commissioner McCool is referring, so whenever a development comes in, they're required to, through concurrency, do a traffic impact analysis to analyze the impact of that development on the surrounding thoroughfare roads. Typically, they're taking a look at the background trips and the conditions as they exist then, and then they usually give a build out date. And they say, okay, we're gonna build out in 4 years, we'll be done. And so what you've seen a lot of times is development takes longer than that build out date. So by the time maybe it's 7 years later, they're coming in. So what we do at the county is, because that background condition has changed, they're not adding those trips to that condition, they're adding them to this condition later. So we've actually required developers to update their traffic impact analysis, which sometimes has resulted in an increase in their proportionate fair share payment because they didn't achieve their build out date on time. I want to be clear that the proportionate fair share is a payment in response to the development's impact on the road network as it is. It allows the county to get that money prior to those impacts occurring. If no proportionate fair share is paid, then they pay impact fees. For every dollar proportionate fair share that they pay, they receive a credit on their impact fees. So it's really a prepayment of impact fees. The benefit is, think of a subdivision of a house, or housing subdivision, you get the impact fee when the CO is issued. Well, the impact occurs then, and we all know, and you get a piecemeal, we all know that that's not enough time to build a road. At least with proportionate fair share, you're getting that money ahead of time. So we have taken revised agreements back to council with increased proportionate fair share payments based on revised TIAs. And obviously, if a development's occurring in the city, concurrency is the responsibility of the city, and we work with all of the cities to on those concurrency agreements.
Thank you. Well, one of the things you can do, and we're doing it now, is to get with a developer before the TIA is even created. And you and your representatives and their traffic engineers come up with a methodology on what are some of the data requirements for the TIA. So that the information that's provided is not out of date. We recently had a TIA obviously with the COVID years, impacts numbers. And so the methodology was changed to avoid that and provide more up-to-date information on what's the actual traffic counts as of today, and try to not try to average what the traffic counts were in COVID, because that's just what the numbers say. So you got to work with your consultants dealing with the traffic impact analysis to come up with a methodology that presents what the facts are as of today. That's really on you and your organization to make sure that those TIAs the methodologies are agreed upon, and before the TIA is conducted, and how up to date that data should be on those as well.
And I would add, I think you had a recent situation which was very frustrating in that regard, but it's my understanding that perhaps the developer had some language in there that said, we've met this requirement way back when. Yes, we got delayed, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it was, but our language says we did it. And so I think some of this, you can't cure what happened in the past, but going forward, I think that you can make sure that you don't strike development agreements that lock in the TIA, and for a development that may or may not, you mentioned, didn't meet the goal. This particular situation, I think, was far longer than 4 years. And yet it was locked in language with a blessed agreement. So it's not just negotiating, which Carmen is an expert at doing in these kinds of things, but it's also making sure that you don't encapsulate in the language a guarantee that, particularly on traffic, that you lock something in when you have no guarantee that the timeline proposed at the time you're negotiating is going to be honored or can be honored. So I think that it's a multifaceted response, and you can't go back and change whoever it was back then that did that with your agreement. But going forward, certainly in DeBerry, I don't want to see locked in language to a set point in time TIA for something that may not happen for 5 or 10 years.
Thank you.
This isn't really about TIAs, but I do want to piggyback on what you said, Ben. Is right now in Orange City, we're under a moratorium for multifamily developments under the Live Local Act. When that expires and our new development standards are adopted, they're not going to be able to trump the recent state statutes or changes on impact fees. And I expect we will see quickly developments coming to the forefront that are going to try and not pay their fair share of impact fees. So the sooner we can get with you guys on working out an interlocal agreement that enables us to collect as much money as we can to address our transportation impacts, I'm all for it. Look forward to the conversation, and hope we can get it done quickly.
With that said, we're going to move on to Orange City, and then after to Lake Hill.
I think we've talked about infrastructure, and that's the topic we're on, and infrastructure is so much more than street systems and or stormwater systems. So I want to kind of move us over to water and sewer land, and I know that not everybody has water and sewer, but I think we may want to work collectively in the future on addressing two problems. One is now we have deadlines for removal of septic tanks within the Blue Spring Basin, and I think every one of us at this table is affected by that deadline. And the second item is the recent enactment of PFAS requirements for the removal of those forever plastics from your water system. We have started costing out what takes us down to the 4 parts per trillion, and it is extremely expensive. And I don't know if collaborative purchasing power may assist us, but all of us are going to have to go through that. And it may be a discussion that our utility systems will want to have together to see if we can do anything that brings down the cost of that.
Thank you. We're gonna go ahead and move along to Lake Helen.
Again, the new guy. Lake Helen, predominantly residential. 75% of the city's revenue is reliant on homeowner tax. In my short time there, I step on toes. Heather will correct me next week, but there is a reluctance in the community against growth. It's Central Florida, but they seem to have isolated themselves in a little bit of a bubble. But we do have some development that is coming through that will be at the interchange of 116 there at Orange Camp Road. We've got some folks that are opposed to that, but the developer already has vested rights in going through. So we will see coming out of that, you know, what the impact will be transportation-wise in reference to Orange Camp Road. When I got there, one of the things I found is impact fees had not been looked at or updated since 1998 in the city of Lake Helen. So getting a proposal, cost proposal, to bring it to the commission, because that has to be updated. We got to make sure we're in compliance with the new state law, and it's very possible that some of our impact fees may actually not be required, meaning we charge transportation impact fee now. There's no plan of doing anything with any city roads. So it's money that's being collected that's just sitting, that can't be spent. So coming out of that could actually be elimination of a couple of those categories. It'd be nice to know what little amount we have. There'd be some way to transfer that over to the county if that had some impact on the county roads that come through Lake Helen. On a small level, I mean, we should have a complete water meter replacement process done by the end of the summer. We'll probably generate some additional revenue because we have a real problem with some dysfunction of meters in the community. So some folks will probably see it as a rate increase, and it's what's going to happen is they're just not going to get billed for what they're actually using. It's not being recorded. Phase 2 out of that is going to be a water distribution upgrade master plan that's being done. I'm told that could be up near the $8 million range of that infrastructure. We don't have we don't have sewer in Lake Helen. It is a septic system, and Heather's been kind of the lead on the talk of septic, and we actually have a workshop coming up. I don't know the exact date, but we have about 8 different workshops coming ahead, and septic is on there. So we don't have the kind of traffic issues that, you know, Deltona and DeBerry and where having, because there's not a lot of retail, commercial in Lake Helen. So maybe other than people passing through, it's not necessarily a destination on that end. And again, most of our road system, the main ones are county roads, but we will see what impact this potential development at 116 there may have, because it will impact both the county road, Orange Camp, both east and west, going through on that process. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're gonna go to Deltona, then Deland, and then DeBerry.
Alluding back to what Dale Arrington was talking about with Orange City, as far as our water infrastructure. And some of the things that we are facing are the septic to sewer. Those, you know, conversions and the cost for all that. You know, we've been pursuing some costs, some funding and all for some of those things. Also, some of those things are going to come out of our Lake Teresa Basin study as far as getting people off the septic tanks in areas that are flooding and all that's going to be a priority. And then Right now, we're going through a meter change-out program now, going to the AMI meters, getting rid of the old analog meters where you just physically go out and read them. We're in that process of getting it installed. We've got approximately 21,000 done now. We've got a total of 35,000 to change out. So we're getting there. It's going to take us several more months to get to the end goal there with the change outs. And then in the meantime, we're working on the process for the radio read, not radio reads necessarily, but you'll be able to sit in the office, push a button, residents will be able to go on a line into a portal, they'll be able to look at their account, see what their water usage is, pretty much real time. We've noticed with those change outs so far, obviously people's water bills have been going up. And part of the reason for that is because the old meters that were in the ground. Some of them, they weren't reading accurately. People are not realizing how much water they're actually using, but once you download that data log and show them, then they start seeing 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, might be a toilet running, which don't sound like a whole bunch, but after a while it adds up. So the water bills increase significantly. First reaction is, well, those meters are no good now because I'm paying, I'm using more water. But I think it educates the public with the information that's downloaded off the data loggers. I think it actually informs them better on what's going on in their household and at what time. So it's a real good thing. I'm really happy to have this underway. I can't wait until it's done. It's been something that's been a long time coming in Deltona. I know Volusia County already has them. I think the land has them. Our city has them. Several other communities have them. So we're kind of bringing up the rear on that. But it will be a good cost or a good benefit. Water savings, water conservation. It'll be a big benefit all the way around. Some of the other things that we have going on too are, as Dale alluded to, the PFAS requirements, the treatment processes out there are very expensive. So that's going to possibly create, well, not possibly, it will create higher utility costs for us to operate, for us to be able to supply the water out to the residents. Another thing right now we're working on, there's a new rule out there it's actually been out there for a while, but it's the lead and copper, where you're having to go through and do an inventory on your lead service lines. Fortunately in Deltona, I don't believe that we really have any, but you have to verify that, you have to prove that. So we have the first round of reports due, I believe it's in October, if I'm not mistaken. And then there are going to be some more extensive, uncovering and making sure to verify the service lines. Also with the schools, their lead and copper stuff with the schools. Some of the things that we've done already is we've implemented, we're taking samples before the water goes into the schools to make sure, on our side, to make sure there's no issues with lead and copper. But after it goes into the school, the water goes in there and it sits, for several hours. If they have any lead service lines in there or any types of things like that, lead leaching from the solder and the joints and all. So those kinds of things are out there. And as we go through, the EPA, DEP, the regulatory agencies are constantly changing the rules, and it's for the betterment. I'm not knocking that at all, but it costs money, everything that we go to do. If you look at a lot of things that we're doing, it's unfunded mandates that are out there. So we have to find the dollars and the money, the funding, to be able to comply with these regulatory requirements. And some of them are very complicated to follow and to understand, very complicated. So we're working diligently on that end from the utility. We do talk to other utilities in the area. We do, collaborate and discuss these issues and try to come up with ways. It may be on the PFAS, it may be something that we have to work together as the cities and the county to come up with a regional plan. Who knows? Who knows what it's all going to come out, because it's going to be so costly. Not one city's going to be able to bear the cost of this stuff. Some of these things coming out. And then Ben alluded to a while ago, we were talking about stormwater. That is part of the infrastructure. We moved on from that. However, Ben had a very important topic or a very important statement. You know, you build these projects, you build these pumping projects to go out to St. John's River. But you also have to take into consideration water quality going out there. You gotta have some type of treatment, whether it's retention ponds, bar pits, whatever it is, and it could be some chemical like alum additions, something to help get rid of the solids in the stormwater going out. And that was one of the big issues that we had with the closed basin that we have with the Teresa Basin. You know, water quality, you know, you have to have credits, you have to, you know, you have to meet all these requirements. So when you're doing these projects, pumping projects for one, but also retention ponds and these types of things, you have to take the water quality into mind, you know, and into consideration so that you design those projects to be able to do that portion too, so that you're allowed to put water out in St. John's, because you can't just pump untreated water out. Yes, sir, Ben.
Just on that same note, there is some rulemaking out regarding nutrient loading. I don't know if the governor signed it yet, but in stormwater, you're required to meet pre-development, post-development for flow attenuation. In other words, you can't discharge more water in the post-development condition that you can in the pre-development condition. Now there's a rule that that same thing applies to nutrients. So moving forward, development will be required, whether it's a road project or a neighborhood subdivision, will be required to treat the stormwater for nutrient discharge to the pre-development condition. And so what you're going to see is more advanced stormwater treatment systems being constructed for newer development, newer roads, things like that. And then in addition to that, there is a system that they are that allows for credits to be created as long as it's within the same basin. And so in other words, if one project generates more nutrient reduction than their pre-development condition, they can generate credits and sell those to another development. So that's something to keep an eye on. Those rules are fixing to come into effect, and it's going to have a dramatic impact on the way stormwater systems are designed moving forward.
Do you know that there's any implications that we might see from that legislation regarding septic water?
I believe it does apply to septic systems as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we can find out. I do know if there's septic to sewer conversions where there's a dramatic reduction of nutrient loading, I believe you can get credits for that and sell those credits. It's kind of a whole new process, to be honest with you, and a lot of it has to be worked out, but it definitely will have an impact.
All right, we're going to go ahead and go to Deland and then DeBerry.
All right, and this is an area where Deland has a lot going on. We've got our largest investment in our utility program right now. Our sewer and water system is being, those capacity and the technology is being increased at our plant. We also work with Gillian Springs. We are providing sewer up to their main drag. So our water area well extends our borders of the city of DeLand. Obviously, municipalities do build roads, but again, with some of our newer development and then partnerships with the county, the school board, we built in to the PDs the ability to kind of start the Beersford extension project. So Beersford will be extended all the way out to Summit and 44. One of our main in routes to DeLand, 44 and Kepler, that circle that's going in, has been going in for a while. That hopefully will help bypass some of that as well. That could have been done with the partnership from the county and the school board, some land swaps, giving the ability to have a path for that roadway that makes sense. In addition, we just adopted an additional fair share fee for our downtown area, for downtown development, to help with the infrastructure in that region. So we recently have an apartment complex that is being built, and we've been searching for downtown living for the last 35 years. We have that now. During COVID, we realized how important having people live in your downtown area is. We had many businesses suffer during that time, so that to have people live, play, and working in our downtown area will be a great resource for our local businesses. We currently, again, go to the partnerships. DOT is heavily invested. We've got a number of large projects that are finally happening. Circle at 44 Kepler, Sunrail obviously is in full rights. We've got some road diets as well happening throughout our town. So there's just a lot of infrastructure changes going on in the land right now. Hopefully all for the positive, and look forward to seeing them through completion.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move to DeBerry.
All right, I have some more handouts, and we try to be as transparent as possible so you can get our full list. I know you all been talking about water and sewer. Just for everybody's knowledge, Barry's not in the water and sewer business. We partner with Volusia County. Mike Allworth does a phenomenal job, and just wanted to say that because he's doing great. I know there's upgrades to the water treatment plant at Berry Plantation. There's we're working on a 2 million gallon water tank behind our fire station, and then some expansion on our potable water throughout the southwest part of Berry. So he's doing a great job. We're also working on a septic sewer program with him. He's got funding, at least engineer phase 1. We have to move 23 DeBerry and off septic on the sewer. I believe Mike Allberg is working on phase 1 engineering. We'll have to go to find the dollars for that construction, I guess in about 18 months or so. And then we're also going to simultaneously going to work on going to the legislature and getting the monies for all the hookups to that for our individual residents. Be about $4 million. What you have in front of you here is a comprehensive list. Doesn't include anything with water and sewer. This is what's going on in DeBerry today. We have 4 major projects this particular year. We have the Fort Florida Road reconstruction, which is $3.4 million. We're building a second fire station, which is $6 million, and both of those are coming on to the council next week for final decision and implementation. Fort Florida Road Bridge, which is the Lake Conomac, which is FP&L's reservoir that goes out to the river. We have to upsize that particular bridge to get that done. And then also Alexander Island. We are working with an ECHO grant with Alexander Island. The total of all 4 of those that's occurring this year is $16 million. One question was asked the other day, well, how much is other people's money? As they call it, is about $8 million. So about 50% is other people's money. So we've been very successful in achieving grants and working these particular partnerships. And those 4 particular projects are just strictly this fiscal year. You can see the list that we go through. We're very transparent. Some of the projects that we're working on. And the second page is all the development that's coming into DeBerry. These are all the developments that are in process. We disclose that to all our residents so that they fully understand that, and most of them on Highway 1792. We just broke ground with our DeBerry Main Street last month. And so that is coming in. You're probably going to see a grocery store coming in here pretty soon, be announced probably, I would say, in the next 6 to 12 months. And then all the out parcels around the Sunrail station will probably all go as well when that grocery store comes in. So the southern part of DeBerry, and we'll be pretty much built out by then once the southern part of DeBerry is developed. So these are all the commercial projects that are coming in, most of them on 1792. You're going to see some significant change in the area in the next 3 to 5 years.
I just want to add that he has mentioned about the amount that we're spending in these 4 major projects and that 50% is OPM. Just to note that the other 50% that DeBerry is bearing is not all coming out of this coming year's millage, for example. We have been looking forward to these projects for a number of years. We have done things like set aside in reserve against these projects. For the new fire station, the fire engine was budgeted and ordered a year or so ago because it's an almost 2-year build out for fire trucks. So not all of that share of these expenses that accrues to DeBerry shows up in this fiscal year. We're coming to fruition over these projects. The Fort Florida Bridge FPL, we first were looking at that in 2019. So as we firmed up what we would do, we've gotten some state appropriations, we have budgeted along the way. So some of this is already sitting within our reserve tapped for this particular project as we had some money left over after a post-audit or that kind of thing. So it's we have a lot of expenses this year, but I didn't want to leave the impression that it's all coming out this year as if it's a brand new surprise to us. It's been years in the planning.
Well, glad to take any questions that you might have. We're also working with, as you can see there, with FDOT, and in conjunction with Orange City, they're doing a resurfacing project for fiscal year 2026. The scope of work seems to be shrinking a little bit, so I may be coming to Dale and Mayor Blair to partner up here a little bit and try to protect the budget for that particular project to enhance 1792 through Orange City and DeBerry. But it's going to go, I think, from Wisconsin and Orange City all the way down to the St. Johns River Bridge. That's a statutory requirement that they have to resurface those. And DeBerry has a very large vision of redoing all of 1792 from Saxon Boulevard to the bridge to rescope that to complete streets, get the bike lanes off the highway and get them on the sidewalks. We did have a recent, well, it's been about 9 months now. I had a bike death on 1792, and so it's just not necessary to have bike lanes adjacent to cars traveling 45, 50 miles an hour. It's just not necessary. And so we're trying to change that obsolete design and go to a more complete street concept. So that's what we're working on.
Thank you, Carmen. We're going to go ahead and go into hurricane collaboration. This one I want us to be a little bit more fluid. So I'm not going to be calling cities, but if you want to, we'll start with the county to see how the county can, what you guys need from us as cities when it comes to hurricane collaborations and how each individual neighbors, how we can get together and come up with plans in case, God forbid, another catastrophe happens. We're all prepared. Obviously, some cities have plans a little bit better outlined than others, and these are the areas that we can learn from each other. And there is no shame in admitting that maybe our plan isn't working, and recognizing if one of our neighbors is getting something done better. So we'll start with the county, and then if a city has something, just raise your hand or just interrupt.
So I'll start just real briefly with a synopsis of projections for this hurricane season. We have not seen the hurricane projections from the National Hurricane Center yet, but Colorado State has put theirs out. They are predicting 23 named storms. 11 of those will be hurricanes, 7 of those, 11 will be Category 3 or greater. So that's about a 35% increase over what is considered normal. So while not all of those are necessarily aimed right at us, we can't assume that at least some of them aren't going to be aimed right at us. We are moving from an El Nino pattern to a La Nina pattern, which means that a lot of the wind shear that normally occurs during El Nino patterns over the Atlantic are now dissipating, and so in El Nino pattern years, those help diffuse those tropical storms before they can form into something stronger. So that wind shear is dissipating over the Atlantic as well. The other thing that's of concern from the National Weather Service that they keep pointing out to us is since about the 1st of March, our water temperatures on both the Atlantic side and the Gulf side are already at July level temperatures. So that's also of concern. So with that in mind, I've had the opportunity now to meet with pretty much every city manager across the county. Being a new kid, not quite as new as Jim, but being a new kid, I'm getting trying to get a good feel for the distinct issues between the beach side and the west side of the county. So please note that our shop is being very, very sensitive that there are differences, and we do realize that. But one of the biggest things in meeting with your city managers and your fire and police officials and public works officials, anticipation. One of the things that we always look at is we try and lean forward into whatever situation is coming at us. And hurricanes, since they're nice enough to give us a little bit of warning that they're coming, we can lean in a little bit harder. So if you have critical infrastructure, your lift stations, power substations, that you know that you have issues with, there is nothing wrong if you don't have the capability of hardening those pre-event, of reaching out to us, and then we can reach out to the state to get additional resources in to harden those facilities. So for example, if we need to put Tiger Dam around a lift station to prevent it from flooding, for example, that's something that we can do, and we can do that before. We're looking at that for a number of our facilities, whether they be healthcare facilities or whatever. So generators, additional pumps, whatever it might be, if we can put together those, what we call in my side of the world, mission-ready packages, and make those requests to the state even before the storm hits, they can either get them to us and help us harden our infrastructure prior to, or they can at least move them into theater so it reduces the amount of response time once the storm has hit. So that's one big critical piece from a collaborative standpoint. The other thing that I would ask of our city level partners is we have space for all of you, or representatives for all of your cities in the EOC. Please try and get somebody to the EOC that has, one, some history with your cities, and two, has some decision-making authority. That helps us be a little bit more agile and a little bit more responsive to the needs that are coming down the pike if we do get a storm, okay, or any other event for that matter, but we're talking specifically about hurricanes. Those are the big pieces, of at least leaning into the storm season that I have. You know your cities better than I do. You know your cities better than my staff does. So we rely on your expertise to provide as much, again, hardening and as much anticipatory action as we can for your individual cities.
Really quick, Mr. Meehan, you said you've already spoken to the majority of the city managers, right? Is there anything you see in our individual cities that maybe in preparation for what seems to be a busy season, storm-related, that we can probably, to get ahead of everything, fix or change? And is there anything specific each individual city can do to help the collaborative, to help us collaborate better between the county and the cities?
So one of the big things is we are in the process of bringing online a new version of WebEOC. Hopefully by the middle of May, we will be able to get out to you and get logins to that for the appropriate people. One of the big things that that is beneficial for us and will be beneficial for the group is what resources do you have? And we're going to go through that process with the county as well. That way we know, hey, if one area of the county is not affected by the storm, or they have a resource that another area of the county may have, we can use our resources here within the county more efficiently. As you all saw during Ian and Nicole, it will take a village. Okay, I mean, it's going to take all of us to respond to any one of these major events, and again, specific to hurricanes, it's going to affect all of us in some fashion. We're already at the point where, for example, we've experienced more rainfall than normal this winter season. We're about 25% above normal according to the Weather Service. So the ground's already saturated and inundated. If we get another storm that brings a lot that is primarily a rain event rather than a wind event, again, it is going to affect all of us, and therefore it's going to take all of us. So one of the big things, to answer, again, going back to your question, that collaborative effort to say, hey, what can I do for my neighbor? What resources do we have that the neighbor may not have? What resources do they have that we may need? And again, what resources don't we have in general that we need to ask up to my shop and ask up to the state for? That's the biggest piece that I can recommend, because again, it is gonna take that true regional response to get through a major impact from a major storm.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I met with Clint. I believe it's Clint, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm bad at names. But Chief Snyder and I met with Clint over a lunch meeting. It's been several weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
And we talked about several things, concerns here at Deltona. So I just want to let everyone know that he is very accommodating. He is very willing to help us and work with us. And I think it's going to be a really good relationship. I really feel very positive about it. So I just wanted to thank you again for meeting with Chief Snyder and I and listen to our concerns, and we listened to your concerns, and we will be working with you and getting you those lists as you put stuff out that you need.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Real quick, Clinton mentioned Web EOC. I want to stress from the public works side, we've been very successful at requesting pumps from the state. And my recommendation, if we're looking at a storm that's going to bring significant rain, get with Clinton's staff and put in a request to the state for large pumps. They can give you the pumps, the hose, the suction hose, everything you need. They will get it here. And if they don't get it before the storm, you get it almost within a day after the storm. And so if you think you're going to need something like that, generators, pumps, anything, put in a request. Worst that can happen is they say no. Because we all know what it's like to try to rent pumps in advance of a storm. And I mean, they have a fantastic system for, I think the pumps we got came from like Tennessee or something. So I would recommend that. We will be having in June, just like we do every year, our luncheon at the EOC for all the cities to come in and join. We'll bring in some of the debris folks, the monitoring folks, and have a little kind of prep situation for hurricane, everybody to get ready. And then the last thing, at the staff level, from a public works standpoint, we all collaboratively work together. I know during the last storms we were working with all of y'all staff. But please don't hesitate to reach out if there's an issue. I know DeBerry reached out during Ian. They were having some issue with one of their pump stations, and we were able to get some utilities folks actually down there to help them and get it up and running. So, like Clint said, please reach out through the EOC. If we try at the public works level have contacts with each other. So barricades, if we get in a flooding situation, pumps. If someone's got pumps and they're not using them, let's try to everybody help out. And I think we do a really good job of that, and I just want to stress that moving forward.
One last thing too or two last things that I might suggest. One, and Ben mentioned it before, the local mitigation strategy. There is a committee to that. I know it's kind of weird to talk about the LMS and the committee before the storms and stuff, but that really is where a lot of these projects get reviewed, categorized, and it's a required step in order for the state to forward our applications onto the feds for that HMGP funding. So please participate in that. We don't have another LMS committee meeting scheduled yet, but when we do, we will be pushing it out. The other thing that I want to remind everybody of, some of the cities have done it, some of them have not. There is a new version of the statewide mutual aid act that came out, and I pushed that out to everybody about the beginning of the year. It doesn't change a lot other than it brings the agreement in line with some legal language. If you have not gotten those through whatever promulgation process is appropriate for your individual cities, please do that and then submit it to the state through the Debbie's portal. The counties is done, so technically we can fight the fight with the state about making sure that the cities are covered under the county's umbrella. But when it comes to FEMA and reimbursement and everything else, making sure that we have those I's dotted and T's crossed with your agreements in place will be helpful and potentially avoid any pitfalls that we have with that funding coming back down the pike should we get declarations from the state of defense.
Yeah, just to let you know some of the issues that we go through. We've already met with our debris and monitoring companies. We haven't done so. You should be meeting with them right now. Maintenance, obviously, we're going through a whole series of maintenance in the off season. Just make sure that we replaced a couple of pumps in our lift stations, make sure that they're particularly at the very plantation, and repaired other ones to make sure they're at optimum performance. One of the strategies we use very effectively, and Ben had talked about, is creating capacity. You know, you got a storm coming and you're 5 days out, chances are we turn all the pumps on, make sure that we can actually create that capacity. St. John's allows you to create that capacity so that when the storm comes, you can hold more water. So that's an important strategy. One of the things, lessons learned from Hurricane Ian, as Ben was talking about, we did have a lot of electrical issues, not necessarily with our pumps, but with our electrical components. We're blowing breakers and everything else. Fortunately, our systems are the same as Volusia County utilities. They were built about exactly the same time when we were able to borrow breakers. So you may want to, since it's such a lead time for electrical components, we went out and purchased duplicate and triplicate of all of our electrical components to make sure that when they do go, because you're going to get a lot of surges with the power going on and off, you want to make sure that you capture those. Unfortunately, your electrical components may take 6 to 9 months to get. So if you haven't done it now, I would do it. Get them ordered. We do have surplus for our systems, but you got to make sure you get those in place, because when your power surges blow out your electricals, you're just sitting there dead in the water. So.
Carmen, if I can, did you find that was an issue because the system was a lot older, or do you think it would be better to look into like upgrading them instead?
Well, no, it's not necessarily older. It's you know, they haven't run at that stress level for quite some time. I mean, you only get hurricanes maybe every other year, et cetera. We do maintain all of our components, but it's those power surges that you get when the power goes on and off and fluctuates. And if you could blow a circuit or you could blow a breaker, and so how do you replace a breaker in the middle of a storm? If you don't have a supply on hand, then you're going to be in big trouble. That's where we got caught in 2000 when Hurricane Ian came. But fortunately, the County utilities that came to our rescue there got us those components that we needed. So that's it. You don't even think about that, and all of a sudden you need a breaker, or et cetera, and then it becomes a major issue.
And after that, Carmen said to me, I'm going to have 3 of every component on the shelf. We're never doing this again. And so we ordered them and we have them. And he's right, it takes some lead time. We didn't have them like the next month or the month after that, but we have them in preparation for the next time we need them. So do work on, if you think this is good advice, do work on ordering your spare parts, because when they sit idle for a long time and then you stress them 24/7 for several days on end, and the power comes on, the power goes off, this is electronics, they blow. We do have a full component for our kinds of things now, just as the county had at least the parts that we needed at the time. And I'm sure we would be willing to share if we don't need that particular component ourselves in an emergency. But you should have yours on order so you can pay us back in a timely fashion.
And the same thing with Deltona. You know, we have 50-something lift stations, sewer lift stations throughout the city, and we have a stock room with spare parts, electrical, if y'all ever need anything. We share it with our stormwater division, anything that we need, and we have our maintenance mechanics and that kind of thing. So any assistance you might need, just let us know too, because we're there for you. We may not have the same exact components you have, I don't know. And you're right, you know, the system is stressed at that time of the year when you get the storms coming in, you have all kinds of, how many times have we had electrical surges? I mean, and it can just be a very small blip, and it can take a phase monitor out, or an alternator out, or a relay out, all these components in the lift stations, you know, in the panels. And there's so many different ones in there, it's hard to have a duplicate of everything there. So that's why you standardize everything, you know, but over the years, Deltona, so, you know, it's been around a long time, this place has. So we've tried to upgrade a lot of the panels, and so, yes, we keep a big stock of that stuff. And we keep it ordered, we keep it restocked, because there's nothing worse in the middle of the night getting out there and you don't have something to work with. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we're not in the water and sewer business, and I say that very happily and gleefully. But to have all those lift stations, our lift stations are strictly just stormwater, and that's why we partner with the county. I always joke about it's probably one of the best decisions Barry ever made. Was not getting into the water and sewer business. But they're more capable, and they have the expertise and the ability to run their system. They're top notch, and so we trust them wholeheartedly. So,
real quick, mentioned debris. This is a lesson learned that we learned through Ian. I think we're all experienced in vegetative debris. When you have a flooding event, you get a different kind of debris. You get what we call white goods or C and D demolition debris. One thing we learned, specifically, this was more in the east side of the county in some areas where we had significant flooding. All of that C and D material and white goods has to go to the landfill. And so most of y'all have debris management sites set up for vegetative debris, but when it has to go to the landfill, that's a long haul, because we weren't taking it at the transfer station for the storm-related C and D stuff. So a recommendation I have is if you can set up and FEMA will pay for it, a transfer area or reduction site for C and D or white goods. My recommendation is to do that because it shortens the time for your haulers. And anything you can do to shorten that haul time, if you have a significant flooding event and you have a significant amount of that type of debris and they're having to haul all the way to the landfill from the west side of the county, they're not going to be very efficient. And the shorter the haul times you can make for those guys, the more of those subcontractors you will get. They'll be more interested in doing it because they get paid by the load. So that's just a recommendation on a lesson learned that we learned at the county level in dealing with a different type of storm event, flooding versus wind.
And if you can have, and again, one of the key things with debris with FEMA, they don't like us touching it any more than we absolutely have to. So if you have a good pre-plan in place on how to deal with, and believe it or not, there are 17 different categories of debris according to FEMA. How you're going to deal with that debris, and just as Ben suggested, if you can pre-stage it in one location, and we can touch it fewer times, one, that speeds up our reimbursement process. Two, it makes FEMA a little happier with us so they don't push back as hard. And three, it gets us back to that new normal as post-event as fast as we can.
I mean, we have a location in Barry where we stage either debris or C and D, but that's still a long haul to the landfill. How do I segment that or reduce that?
There is ways to reduce it. You can crush it, actually, the white goods. There's FEMA guidelines for it. But what you want to do in order to maximize the debris pickup in your neighborhoods is that the hauler that's picking it up, if you can take it to a local site, just like you do with veg, if you can take it to a local site versus having them run all the way to landfill and come all the way back, and work with your monitoring firm to make sure that you're following the guidelines. But there is a way, there are procedures that FEMA will reimburse you for, and then once you reduce it, and they pay for the reduction, and then they pay for the secondary haul out, just like they do with vegetative.
Okay, thanks.
One thing I'd like to say, I've been multiple meetings. This is probably the 6th time I've seen Clint. So that tells me the importance that the county has put on not only emergency management, but collaboration. First meeting I had with him was at the Volusia City County Managers meeting, and invited me out to the facility and was advised that we're one of those cities that has not taken advantage of that desk and that seat and that participation. Had a positive meeting with the police chief and public works. So a little bit, we all get stressed going into the season, but knowing that at least there's this mindset and attitude that it's not us against the county, it's us with the county is very much appreciated. On the local level, we're doing the same things that we all should be, the tree trimming, the catch basins clean out, the storm drain, to try to mitigate any of those issues. Also, will thank the commission in a short time. I didn't realize when I became the city administrator, I was also the city planner, the finance director, and a couple of other hats. It's probably the smallest location I've worked and the hardest I've worked in the last 3 months, but the commission did approve some help at the last meeting for a consultant to get us through the FROC survey process. But I want to thank again Volusia County and Clinton in particular, just in the number of meetings and outreach and what I'm seeing on there. Let's all knock on wood and say we do all this planning and this is a year that we don't get a hurricane. But if so, I feel a lot better going into it, and I appreciate the opportunity and your outreach.
Front City, did you want to add? No? The land, nothing? Okay. So we're gonna go to the last part of our meeting, and with that, you can also do your closing statements. So we'll go ahead and start with the Barry. Upcoming projects, best practices, challenges, and any closing statements you have.
Well, I think we've covered everything. We're really excited about our Main Street coming in. We worked pretty hard on getting that. We have a lot of growth challenges, but we're very proud in that the projects that we have installed this particular year, we're installing these particular projects in advance of the growth coming. A lot of times you see development come in, and then cities and counties are working hard to do the infrastructure after the fact. But we're very proud that we're getting these projects in prior to the growth, and so that it can support the growth that's coming in. So it's a great strategy. And as the mayor said, we're not giving out this money all at once. We've been saving and strategizing for these particular projects for quite some time, and they're just now coming to fruition. So we're very proud of that, and that's, I don't know, Mayor, you have anything else to say?
And we're proud of Alexander Island, which we will move forward with, which is our new large conservation area and passive park. That's it.
Delant?
No, just a big thanks for organizing this. It's my first time coming to one of these, so it's been a pleasure. I think everyone is dealing with growth. Florida's dealing with growth. One of the things I try to remember when we're looking at issues in the land when it comes to traffic and whatnot, a lot of times it's traffic coming into the land during rush hour and whatnot, which is always a great thing. So you're always welcome to come to the land, and the county seats the land, and we've got a great Main Street. So we're constantly looking for ways to improve. I think the partnership between the municipalities on the west side is fantastic, and I look forward to growing that because we are stronger together than we are fighting against each other. So with that, I will pass it on.
Lake Helen?
My first meeting here, wasn't sure exactly what to get out of that, and I realize now the value. I did question initially when they were picking the dates on Saturday. When most of us know what we go through Monday through Friday in terms of that process. There's a lot of challenges in Lake Helen. It's a small community. I won't go into the big list, but I am going to use this opportunity to at least say something to you all that really the message is for Heather. The new guy coming in, funding is always a problem. And we don't like to pass costs on. What businesses do, they pass costs on. We're a small city, we don't have a lot of money, but when the garbage company does their annual CPI increase, we can't use reserves to buy down that 1 year payment because we're afraid of the voters being angry because their garbage bill is going to go up. when you pay for a study and they tell you what your stormwater fee should be, you can't take 75% of that because you're afraid of passing that on, because all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. You're delaying the funding, and you're never going to catch up on that funding that you missed during that process. I wish the other 4 of my members were here. And who knows, we'll see how that message goes long term when we get to budget time. But we all know there's never enough money out there to take care of just day-to-day needs, let alone spending it on things that actually at the end of the process don't have one single tangible benefit to either your infrastructure or your overall preparedness in there. So we'll see how that message goes as I go through the budget process.
Heather, do you want to add anything to that? Orange City?
Yes, it was great seeing everyone this morning. It's been quite a long time since we've had one of these. So it's very informative. Thank you guys for coming, especially Ben. We've got a lot of projects we're working on in Orange City. A few of them, we continue to loop our water system to have clean water. Dale mentioned Graves Avenue. That's down by John Knox Village. So if some of you drive home that way, you'll see how low that road is. The retention pond she was referring to is part of the Industrial Drive project by the post office. And if you've been at the post office during the rainy season, it floods out quite easily there. So we're trying to take care of that. You'll notice the traffic slowed down a little bit on 1792 because we're running our septic lines under to the west side. Hopefully that'll help that area. Big French bike trail, multi-use trail from Valentine Park out to, I'm going to keep talking because it's raining and I won't be able to ride home. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But no, at any rate, so we got a lot of things going on, and I'm really proud of my staff and my other council members. We got Orange City rocking and rolling.
Would you like to add anything?
So, real quick, I just want to put in a plug for the West Volusia water suppliers. It's a collaborative effort amongst the county and the West Volusia cities when it comes to water supply and utility related issues. And I'm sure we'll be talking about some of the rules and regulations that Dale brought up. And then right on cue, we got a nice little rainstorm. I was going to talk about stormwater. Hope to kind of replicate that collaboration on the stormwater side. We'll be reaching out to you all's respective staff to discuss some of these updates to the stormwater watershed plans and things like that, and try to work together on collaborative efforts and projects moving forward when it comes to stormwater. Thank you.
The only thing I'll add is thanks. Thanks for welcoming the new kid. I'm very happy with my new home here in Volusia County. Coming from Utah, it's a little bit of a culture shock, but at least, much like Jim, I don't have to deal with winter storms and avalanches and stuff like that anymore. If we have a winter storm, I'm moving someplace else. But I do applaud everybody's efforts for the collaboration and stuff. I watched Salt Lake County go from what we kind of jokingly called a big small county to a small big county. In my career there, we went from a population of about 680,000 when I retired last June. We were right at 1.2 million and half the geographic size of Volusia County. So this is a fantastic place, but I applaud you all for being collaborative because it is such a fantastic place. You're going to get more people like me moving here, I have no doubt. So I applaud you all for trying to get in front of it and stay in front of it and keep Volusia County what it is. And again, thank you for welcoming me and looping me into your operations and making me feel welcome. And I check my ego in at the door every day. So if you ever need anything out of me in my shop, even if we're screwing up by the numbers, let us know. You're not going to hurt our feelings. Thank you.
I personally wanted to give a thanks out to Carmen from the city of DeBerry. I took on this role as interim city manager it's been over 8 months ago, Carmen, believe it or not. And whenever I was appointed by the commission, it was unanimous, which I was surprised with. But anyway, Carmen reached out to me, and he's been a help. He's given me advice all through these months, and I do appreciate it, Carmen. I just want to personally thank you, and you know, for putting up with me. And you know, maybe I didn't follow all your advice, but it was good advice to have. So I appreciate it. With that, I'm going to be quiet and move on and give it back to the mayor. Thank you.
So personally, I just want to appreciate every single one of you here. I know that I'm still somewhat of a new mayor, and you know, for as much as people say that we like to compete against each other, I think we do it in a very healthy way, because when the time comes and push comes to shove, I've seen so much support from every single one of you, whether it was the Barry during our city manager crisis, or the businesses that come from Warren City during the hurricane season that were there to support us, or even the county. You know, it just shows that, you know, while our county is very diverse in so many aspects, we know how to come together as a community to help each other out. So I know that these summits might seem a little bit long or extended, but it's important because we get to learn from each other, and we get to learn where we can grow, and good advice, usually we get it from the Barry when it comes to the stormwater stuff. But on a serious note, this is great, and I'm very appreciative of every single one of you. Ben, you might not know this, right? And I don't want to stroke your ego or anything, but a lot of us think very highly of you. Some of us don't reach out to you as much as we should. But I make it a common theme when I'm talking to, whether it's my county council person or somebody from that county council, what does Ben think? And they're like, well, why don't you just call him, right? So thank you guys. I know, I believe the next city up would be Lake Helen. The land asked to kind of be left to the very end again. So you guys will have to reach out and figure out a date and a place. So thank you guys for joining us, and hopefully we can keep collaborating. Enjoy your families and have a great rest of your weekend. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.